Thanks, Chair, and thank you both very much for your presentations. Fascinating stuff. And I was very keen to hear Ms. Neary's presentation because of the emphasis on the online advertising and how online advertising can grab behaviour and attitudes and likes and dislikes of individuals in order to then target them for particular messaging. And the reason I'm concerned about it is because of the upcoming referendum. And it's really interesting to note that the new regulations being brought in Europe that will control this, the data protection legislation, will be brought in on the very day that the referendum is being held, the 25th of May. So it doesn't cover the period between now and when the referendum is held. But I have serious concerns, as do many people out there, given the recent revelations of the Cambridge Analytica and the use that they made of information that people's data and information on Facebook. It was reported that some 87 million Facebook users were affected by the misuse of data by Cambridge Analytica. And one of their former employees, a man called Thomas Borwick, is being engaged by the No side in the referendum campaign to produce online advertising for that side. So I think that connection in itself is a big worry for what may happen in terms of influencing the democratic outcome of the referendum over the next period of time. So I'd just like to ask the Data Commissioner, because I'm a bit mixed up that you don't see that you might have a role in this, because on the one hand you tell us, and you know, this is obviously your legal job description, that you are concerned with the enforcement of data subject rights and the supervision of organisations who hold, use and control personal data of individuals. And then you say that your office has no role in regulating the core aspects of electoral activity, including advertising and canvassing activities, other than where that personal data is deployed. Could you comment on that and clarify for me if you see your own role as having no sense of querying what might be going on with the use of personal data in the referendum campaign? I know you're saying your role is distinctly it doesn't overlap with electoral activity, but you do say other than where that personal data is deployed. And if it's been proved that companies like Cambridge Analytica and others have used personal data to influence democratic outcomes in other countries, would you have concern about that in the current referendum campaign? And the last thing I'd like to ask you about is you say that you're concerned about vulnerable internet users such as children, but would you not think that there's a whole cohort of vulnerable internet users such as older people, a bit like myself, who grew up in an age where it wasn't instinctively automatic that you learned about social media and how to use it, and that there's a whole cohort of the electorate out there who are very vulnerable to that type of advertising. This is my final question. In terms of the impact that the Cambridge Analytica scandal has had, of that 87 million Facebook users who were affected, have you any idea how many of them are based in Ireland? And given that Facebook has its second largest headquarters globally in Dublin, would you be concerned that there might be more of a targeting of an Irish audience, or is that wrong? And would you have any idea how many Irish people are concerned Facebook users?
Thank you very much, Deputy. If you wouldn't mind answering those two rounds, Deputy Stanley's and Deputy Smith's questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. In relation then, Deputy Smith, to your questions around behaviours and attitudes and political micro-targeting, you said you were confused in relation to the opening statement around the role of the DPC. The statement in our opening statement was designed to convey that the particular legislation that the committee intends to do scrutiny on today is not a matter for comment by this office as to whether there's a requirement for an imprint on a political ad that shows the original funder. But of course, we are concerned with every aspect of electoral activity and political activity that concerns the processing of personal data. So in relation to Cambridge Analytica and the 87 million users, which were mostly based in the USA, What was at issue in that particular case is that Dr. Kogan at Cambridge University, who originally was the app developer who accessed the data from Facebook's platform and is alleged to have transmitted it on, contrary to Facebook's policies, to Cambridge Analytica. What he had been doing at Cambridge University was psychometric research based on a model called OCEAN, which is around personality traits of individuals, so openness, conscientiousness, right through to the scale of neurotica that a person stands at. And so what was asserted to be the case was that individuals could be micro-targeted based on these personality profiles and classifications. And it's that I pointed out, that social scientists and academics who are looking now live at this area say that there's no evidence that targeting based on that type of personality and psychometric segmentation has happened, or that it has manipulated results. So there is further research needed in this area, but it's undoubtedly the case, because it's happening already in an offline context as well as an online context, that of course there is political micro-targeting. That's not necessarily harmful, it's not necessarily a bad thing that there would be some targeting of messages. It happens in an offline context where posters or particular issues that politicians want to promote relative to a geographic area in which individuals live, there are segmented and targeted messages delivered to the constituents in that way. So not all political micro-targeting is harmful, and not all of it involves a manipulation of a user's data in a way that they wouldn't anticipate. But individuals do have some level of control, albeit the transparency around how they can exercise that control isn't yet good enough, and we expect to see an improvement from May under the GDPR. Users do need to be aware that if they haven't exercised their controls online to switch off interest-based advertising, then they are being targeted based on segments that the platforms deem them to be interested in. In relation to the 87 million affected users, and Facebook can confirm these figures, 15 individuals in Ireland downloaded the app that Dr. Kogan published, and up to 44,000 Irish users were affected as friends of users that downloaded the app, in that their data was accessed by Dr. Kogan and it's alleged passed to Cambridge Analytica. In terms of vulnerable internet users, I think you're absolutely correct. Children was just an example of a vulnerable internet user. There are lots of reasons why the GDPR, as proposed and enacted, now requires privacy by design and default and encodes these new principles under the GDPR, in order to ensure that before a user has to go searching and looking for controls about what it should switch off and switch on, that already they should be able to anticipate that there's a level of default protection when they arrive on the platform. So again, this is what we anticipate we're going to see, not just from the platforms, but all sorts of sectors and data controllers from the 25th of May 2018.
Very briefly, because we're